Now that you've completed your analyses and interpreted your results, the next step is to think about how to communicate your conclusions to have the desired impact. There are a few important things to consider. Most importantly, who is your target audience? Who you're trying to reach is in turn going to influence what is the most appropriate medium of communication. Independent of the way you communicate your results, you will want to make your data and code available. That way, others can join you in your scientific quest, and we can engage in a rich, fact-based scientific exchange. And all of these practical decisions can be guided by the goal of using science to bring about positive change. Your target audience will depend on what you want to achieve by communicating your research, and the same findings can be relevant to several different target audiences. Common examples of target audiences include domain experts, that's other researchers in the field who are familiar with the subject and will likely only need a brief introduction to the topic, but might be interested in details regarding the methods and the results. Then there are scientists in other disciplines who have a high degree of science literacy in general, but are less familiar with your specific research domain. But there are also other stakeholders which scientists, and especially climate scientists, might want to address. In our specific example of research connecting global warming to increases in atmospheric CO2, these stakeholders could be policymakers in charge of regulating energy production, carbon emissions, or environmental protection, communities that are impacted by the increase in temperature, industries that could decrease their carbon emissions willingly or be pressured to do so by policy, and members of the general public who individually or collectively have the power to influence policies, communities, and industries. It is important to tailor your medium of communication to the target audience you want to reach. Scientific papers or conference talks are most well suited for knowledge exchange with domain experts or scientists in related fields. When addressing a broader scientific audience or the general public, other forms of communication like blog posts, social media posts, or podcasts might be more effective. These media are designed to reach a large number of readers or listeners, and consuming the content usually takes very little effort, certainly less than reading a scientific paper. Such posts may seem as if they're mainly representative of the author, but they will always be most effective when geared towards a specific target audience. Presentation held in person or more and more virtually online are a great way to directly engage with a relatively small audience. They can be a good medium to promote a cause to a local government or funding agency. And presentations can also be a great way to engage with the general public and communicate why your research is so important. To add a note on scientific publishing is a huge industry with very many different businesses involved. Publishing companies are running a very profitable business because authors pay to publish and readers pay to access publications. But on the other hand, costs are low. By convention, reviewers are usually asked to donate their time, so that costs are mainly centered around editing and archiving. One of the primary goals of NeuroMatch and Climate Match is to make science inclusive and allow as many people as possible to be part of the scientific community. Even though most published research is funded publicly, often only big, well-funded institutions can afford access to these scientific publications. So whenever possible, publish in open access journals so that your research can reach people worldwide independent of their financial resources. An important part of building a global science community is making data and code available online. Importantly, data doesn't only need to be accessible, but both data and code need to be structured in a way so that others can reproduce and expand on your findings. Data archives can be domain-specific or domain-general. Pangea and NOAA Paleo data archives are two Earth and climate science specific data archives. And Zando and Figshare are examples for domain general data repositories. And which of these archives is best suited for your data really depends on the type, size, and potential use of your data. GitHub is one of the most widely used code repositories. When communicated well, your research can bring about real-life positive change. This can work through reaching out to communities that your research is relevant for, to inform them, but also to be in turn informed by them in your research. By broadening participation in climate science, by educating the next generation, and making science accessible to those who are currently underrepresented in our community, or by advocating for policy change. You will be able to hear more about these topics during our Impact interview series. So there's a lot to consider when communicating your research, but when you target your audience just right, we can together bring about real-life positive change.